If you have more traditional parents or even immigrant parents, you know how tough it can be to see eye to eye, especially when you're younger. My podcast guest, Manu, is an architect who shares her journey of building a successful career to hitting burnout and navigating the cultural and family pressures that came with stepping back from work. We talk about breaking generational expectations, redefining success, and how design isn't just about spaces, it's about healing and authenticity. Keep listening and let me know what you think. Hi, I'm Mimi Zhang, and this is the Explore with Mimi podcast. In our first series, What If It All Works Out, we're diving into bold stories of people making huge life changes. It's raw, inspiring, and just maybe the nudge you need to take your own leap. Let's explore together. Hey, Manu. How's it going?
Hey, it's been going good. It's early morning for me. I really wish we could do this in Bali. It would have been so much fun.
Perhaps in the future, could meet up in person too. For context, Manu and we met in Bali about 4.5 months ago at a women's open.
Yeah.
We kind of connected and shared a bit about each other's journey. And she's gone through some life transitions as well. For me, I had left my job back in mid-July, so we got to talking. And Manu, what was happening in your life when you decided to slow down taking projects 2 years ago?
So I'll start from the start of I ended up in the space first because that makes more sense. I've always been a creative individual who's always been driven towards design. So I very clearly knew what I wanted to do in general in my career space or my life space, because for us Asian kids, career and the work is a lot to do with our identities, right? I just knew when I was in my 12th grade that I want to go into architecture. So you can either be engineers, doctors, and then you can be in the creative field and be an architect. That felt very easy for me to decide because I knew I liked spaces. I am a very visually spatial person. I knew what I was getting in myself into. But 5 years of college and then doing a year of a job, and then I just knew that I want to start my own studio. And they were very supportive of that stuff because it made sense for them. She went to college and now she has a lovely job and now she wants to do her own thing, which they were very supportive about. I started doing my own thing in 2018. I also luckily ended up getting a decent chunk of work, and I began with a nice, lovely cafe as my first project. And at that point, I did not think about anything of how is this business going to build? How is this going to work out? I was just driven towards doing good work. I just wanted to do work that I really enjoyed doing. And everything was just a part of that. So I never thought of it separately as, okay, this is what is a burden in this work process, or this is the space where I don't feel good going about. And eventually when it started going from 0 to 20 plus projects in 3 4 years, like, because I was taking everything that was coming my way, and I was trying to build a system in some ways which was already established by other architects, but I started to see that system was not really working in a very healthy way for me. I was doing a lot of the work myself, dealing with clients, contractors, and vendors, and I did not have a partner in the process. When you start building these systems, you start realizing that there's a hierarchy to things, and then you have to take a lot of responsibility. You can delegate work. At that point, I was too young to understand all of this. I was just trying to delegate work, which was not going great, and my relationships with people in that space was not very, very nice. I started realizing that, okay, I'm taking up too much responsibility and there's so much masculine energy constantly that I'm dealing with. At 8 a.m. in the morning, I'll get a call from my contractor. Okay, ma'am, how are we supposed to go about things on site today and this and that? And my day would start so early and then it would end really late because Indian working systems in architecture and interior design is so unorganized that people do late nights, labor is cheap, everyone's exploiting everyone in some ways, and you get tangled up in that system and you forget that. And I started getting really exhausted by the fourth year when I started working with some of my relatives, and I started realizing that, okay, this is not how I want to work. This is not how I want to deal with my contractors. I want to be kind. I want to be in a better headspace when I'm dealing with them and with my clients. And thankfully, I had really good clients, but the pressure of performing really well constantly and not making mistakes started really triggering me when I took a relatives project, because my image of my parents was so associated that it brought me to a crash. That, okay, I need to really stop and reflect on how these systems are and how do I want to go about this studio that I really love building. Also, COVID really helped me slow down because the work was not happening, but there were still people who were pushing me to work. And eventually, 2 years back, I slowed down. And, oh my God, I'm not going to earn. I have nothing to do. So 1 year it took me to just come to that space. And then eventually, the next year, really just stopped. I really need space and time for myself to just see what have I done in the last whatever years. How do I want to go about it going forward? That was the best thing that I did for myself and my journey in general, not just work, but my own personal space, my own mental health, and my own relationships with my family. Now I have a husband. So much happened. And I could actually see that there's so much that I have to do and I want to do, which I got caught up because of work. Yeah.
Now that makes sense. It sounds you had too much of a good thing. You had too much work to juggle. And
Yeah.
since you've stepped away from these traditional work patterns, what was the thing that surprised you the most about this transition?
That's a great question. What surprised me the most was that I was not grateful enough for the work that I already had, to be honest. When I sat down, and I always had this mindset that I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. There has to be something more that has to happen. When you're not working, you start looking at other people in a way that, oh, this person is reaching here. Your competitiveness, just as being an Asian kid, I don't know if this is an Asian thing. Look at that kid who's doing so much better. Look at this person who's doing so much better. I started realizing, okay, I did quite a lot even when I just had begun. And when you see 3 years, and in your head it's, oh my God, I've spent 3 years, I've done nothing. But when you actually sit down and reflect, you're so great. I was filled with gratefulness after 2 months of reflecting that, okay, I'm glad things came to this point, and I'm glad. But it took me a lot of back and forth to come to this headspace also, because I was just, no, I have to work. I can't leave work. So I was just shocked that, okay, I did do enough. And that was shocking for me, that I could bring myself to that space of saying that it's okay, that how much ever I've done is enough. Yeah.
I can
I'm
relate.
curious how it was for you. Yeah, because I'm sure you can relate. Yeah.
How much do you think that is internal, the feeling of not doing enough versus something that culture has kind of thrust upon us? From my experience, having Chinese immigrant parents, they came to
Mm-hmm.
America for the American dream. So they wanted a better life for me, my brother. And there's this huge sense of competition and ambition, and the parents who compare each other's kids together. Oh, my daughter placed first in this, or my son made multiple six figures. So there's a lot of that comparison game. My sense, and I've gone through therapy and kind of talked it out, is a lot of this is cultural, at least in my case, in my upbringing. I was always expected to participate in lots of different clubs, get a lot of awards, and make sure I had a really top GPA.
Oh man, yeah, I can understand. It's quite similar.
Hmm.
I have also come to realize that it has a major part to do with what society you're in, for sure. What are your parents' peers doing, and what is their bubble feeding them constantly? Because their feedback loops are limited. And then when you start seeing, if you're not exposed to the world in a way that, okay, you can still explore different aspects and you can still go ahead and not be focused on grades and stuff, there are things outside of that that you can be doing and be really fulfilled. But it's not about contentment for most of us Asian parents, right? It's about survival and safety and earning money and getting into a safe zone so that you don't fall back into it's a very cultural thing, for sure. I can see that. But you internalize what your parents felt, and because they project so much onto you, and you internalize all of that, and then you start seeing that this is your reality, as this is what it is.
I think the other part that I've had to learn, and it's something that you sort of touched upon, is recognizing that you've done a lot and being
Yeah.
setting time aside to appreciate what you've done. Because I think just going back to my childhood, even if I have all A's or I get medals and I placed for different things, I never really felt much of a sense of, wow, I did an awesome job. It always felt
Yeah.
so.
Mm.
That's something I've been trying to do more, to appreciate my accomplishments, because it doesn't come naturally because of the way I was conditioned.
Yeah, I think you're touching on a nerve here, which is too close to being similar. Because, like, our parents never knew how to validate. I feel like they assumed that validation was a thing that you did not have to express. They were probably just by gifting you something, or their gestures were different, but you really needed to hear that, okay, you're doing enough in this world, and whatever you are trying to do is good enough.
You are
And
loved.
that validation was definitely lacking. Yeah, you are loved
You are
for
loved
whatever you do. Like,
as you are.
yeah.
Yeah. And it could be the time that our parents grew up in was very different to what it is.
Yeah,
Maybe there was certain economic
for
struggle
sure.
or revolutions or wars. So
And their parents projected certain things onto them. So they ended up internalizing that. And then, yeah, it's a whole trauma series.
are we the ones? Are we the ones to break the generational trauma?
Yes. Yes.
Oh
I have
God.
both the elder daughter trauma breaking system, and then I also have the woman in the household who's breaking the system. So yeah, both. I think you're the same in yours.
The elder daughter breaking the trauma. How did your parents react to your decision to step away from your work or follow this less conventional career trajectory? Did it clash with any of their expectations around
Hmm.
stability and security?
So to be honest, the break that I arrived to was not the most pleasant way to go about it. I was having issues in my own family with my parents. The relationship was not that great at that point. We were having a lot of arguments and fights in general because I was living with them. It was a dynamic that was not really the best for me to have my own space to process all of this. But thankfully, I had a really great support system in my friends, which had to happen in some way. If it did not happen that way, it wouldn't have even led to this point because my identity was tangled up with my work, and it eventually also was tangled up with my dynamics with my father and my mom, and especially my dad, because I am really attached to him, but I also seek a lot of validation from him. And I was seeking that and I wasn't getting enough of it. And that is what led to my work feeling not enough and everything that was around it. But we had to sit down and have important conversations that, okay, I'm not feeling right about this. And it was a very messy period of time because it was happening in a very imperfect way, which it usually does, because there is no perfect way to go about it with your family. And so when I took the break, I think I was forced to take a break in a way. My life just forced me to just go, stop the fuck now. Because otherwise there was no other way to really reflect. Like, I was just bang bang bang, going headstrong, hustle hustle hustle, don't think about anything, just keep at it. So yeah, my family also was suffering because of my way of being, and I was not giving them enough space to have a conversation. My parents were supportive of the break. They were, if you need this for yourself, just fix this thing that you have. It was more about fixing and not really, it was not the best way to go about it, but also that they were seeing me struggle so much in a lot of ways that they never stopped me from taking a break. They were, yeah, you need this now. Just let's just have these conversations. And it's still an ongoing process. I don't think we have come to a point where we're okay, sorted, everything's great now, and we're a happy family, la 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 la. That's not how it goes. It's still a progress and a process, progressively better, but not perfect ever that way. And that's how it's with my work as well. I've kind of come to embrace that part that, okay, let's just keep getting better at building these relationships as well, and getting better at managing how you want to work and refining little things. And every time I have a conversation with my family, it takes a lot of energy to come together and sit and have that conversation. But it's gotten so much better since then. They were supportive, but the period was not that great for any of us.
Life is messy. It's not always
For sure.
I'm glad that things are getting better and that you're keeping that communication going. A question I think some folks may have is, did your parents face any questions or judgment from others that were their peers or their friends as you were going through this journey, this point of transition?
Oh my God, this podcast is a session of some sort. But it's in a really good way. I am enjoying and I'm feeling it in my body at the moment. They have friends, but they don't have relationships that are very close. It has its pros, but it also has its cons that we don't end up having people to take third opinions from, or say, if we have a problem in the relationship as family, my parents and me, there's nobody who can give them a third perspective in that way. And which is why nobody knows what happens in these four walls. It's the judgment of others that affects them to be so harsh on us kids, that because of course they feel the judgment of the society, but it's not the reality. Nobody in the world is bothered as much, right? Technically nobody really cares. Everyone is so involved in their own lives and their own worlds. That's what drives our parents, the fear of their judgment. But the judgment is a day's judgment and nobody is going to give a shit. But my parents have evolved with me, and they also see that the world is not as harsh as they imagine it to be now. We are in a much safer world now. I don't think it matters to them that I took a break, and it matters more to them that I was feeling better and fine. They do want their kids to look a certain way in the society. They'll be drawing their own images and ideas of who we are and not accepting us for who we are. But slowly progressing, I feel now I'm a bit more okay with their pace of understanding all of this, because I understand their side of the story as well.
There are always two sides to a story, and I think they grew up in a different generation. The fact that they're also going on this journey with you and evolving their mindset is a very positive sign. What you were saying about judgment, sometimes it's more an illusion, but it's so temporary. Yeah. People are so busy with their own things, they're gonna forget about what's going on in your family. As I get older, one of the things that keeps coming up to me is I want to become more authentic and aligned with who I truly am. I think that is true freedom.
Yeah, for sure.
Not the easiest, but if you embark on the journey, it's very rewarding to become more who you are.
Super.
Mm-hmm.
It is a difficult process because the core essence of anybody's being is the identity of them being seen through their parents' eyes. If your parents' eyes are in a way of, they don't want to see your authenticity, it's hard. It's really hard that they don't want to see the authentic you. If that's the way they go about it, that's what causes hurt, and the whole process becomes a bit more hard. But it is rewarding because that whole process leads to transformation within you, and then the relationship with your parents also changes because of whatever little courage you build up to have those important conversations about your own authentic being. And in most cases, that fear is what holds you back from that transformation, when your own authentic expression, oh, my parents will mostly look at it that way, and you have internalized your parents' image in your own head as well. I feel once you have that conversation, it's going to be super wild. The conversation might go in any direction, but it'll be out of you because you've already faced it. That's what is really important. Having these conversations with your close ones or your family who you love the most releases that tension that holds you back from being your most authentic self, because you're not the most authentic in front of your most loved ones in a lot of ways, especially in Asian households.
We as people, we probably have different roles, different sides of ourselves that we show to different people.
Yeah.
What kind of strategies did you utilize to help them understand and accept your decisions? Maybe share strategy for someone who is thinking about telling their something that is very difficult for the parent to accept.
Okay, so I have to mention this, that Kunal, who's my husband, he was not my boyfriend at that point when I was going through all of this. He was a really good friend to me. And even the friends whom I was expressing all of this to. And I was telling them that this is what's going on in my family. There are a lot of people I have seen who don't express what's going on in their families because they're so insecure. And they have been conditioned that way to not let people know the bad parts of your family dynamics. But he gave me a very safe space, and it could be a therapist, it could be anybody who has the safe space for you. I think that was very important and crucial for me at that point, to have a space where I can just be my fully authentic self. I can express all of my anger as is, all of my hurt as is, which gave me some ground and empowerment to have those conversations without just breaking down every time. There were points I did break down multiple times. I still do end up breaking down so bad. But now I just can go back to that okayness, that okay, this is the process. It is going to be bad and high and low and high and low and high and low. But at that point, I needed somebody to tell me that. I needed somebody to hold that ground for me. Even if you tell them the worst parts about you, life is not going to come to an end. The biggest fear is you feel that you will be abandoned or your parents will not love you anymore, but you have to have those conversations with them because you need to come to that okayness that life is not going to end. Just be your authentic self, get it out of your system, and then go back to people who know you as you. And I get it, but there are ways to go about it. And also being with your body, like somatically being there, it's a process to be able to do that. The biggest strategy for me at that point was going to my friends and then having that conversation again. It was very hard. I was not allowed to have those conversations with my friends also because I was told that they are the ones who are brainwashing you into being somebody who you are not, which I bodily felt it, that I knew I am this person and you're not seeing me that way anymore, because you come to a point when you're an adult as 27-year-old, 28-year-old, that, okay, no, I'm not this individual that you see me as anymore. So when friends start seeing you, when your peers and good people start seeing you, and the goodness in you finds those people eventually. My biggest thing and having that support system was really crucial, or having somebody in your family, somebody who can hold that ground for you or navigate that conversation for you. It's going to be very different for everyone. This is what worked for me. And at that point, I think even seeing other people's perspectives, not just own family or my own friends, but how are other people looking at the world? Why are they so okay in their bodies and safe, feeling not, I don't know, trembling with fear about their own authenticity? Made me question all of that. Questioning, okay, what is happening? Why is this happening to me? That led me to a lot of good podcasts. Art of Accomplishment is something that's a Bible for me now. Joe Hudson, I love him and he's a great dude and he sees life in a certain way. I must have projected certain ideas onto him and gone, okay, if this individual gets it, I can figure it out in some way. But now I know it's all about my own internal experience and how much can I embrace in that moment and then find a way to embrace it through, say, my friends or my journaling or my meditation or my breath work or my yoga or anything, any practice that comes in your way to manage, to be with the experience mostly, because that is what is the essence of it, in my opinion. Everyone has a different experience of going through that.
Okay. It definitely feels having a safe space to go to, someone that you can talk
Yeah.
to is very important in this process. You also mentioned having some outside perspectives, listening to certain podcasts,
Yeah.
and people such as yourself, even sharing your experience on the podcast could help inspire another person as they're thinking about, oh, how do I tell my parents about big life decisions?
I totally get it.
That can really help someone, just hearing another person's experience. I think for me in the past, whenever I've had a tough conversation coming up with my parents, or it might be with a friend, or if it's a certain disagreement or something happened, I usually tend to write down everything that I plan to say. Sometimes there's a clutter in the mind, into pen and paper, or you type it down. Sometimes it can organize and become more clear, and you can feel more prepared before you have a big discussion. So that is something I've tended to do in preparation for types of conversations.
Journaling and any kind of practice, even sitting with yourself in any way, came to me a little bit after I had very big conversations, because till that point I was just brimming up inside me and I was not even feeling safe within my own self. When I sat with myself, I would be so anxious and so in a space where I had to go to someone, and that was needed. Therapy is needed when you're in a very, very critical space and you probably can't sit down with yourself. And eventually, I started feeling more safe because I had those conversations. I could see that, okay, I am able to do all of these big conversations, and it feels overwhelming in the moment to have these confrontations with people I'm projecting my fear onto. And when I started doing those over and over again with my loved ones, say my partner, even now when I have to have a conversation which is a bit more scary or which is a bit critical in some way, now I wouldn't feel as much fear as I would feel when I was having those things with my parents. But now I know that I can go back to myself and have those clarity of thought and write stuff down and sit and meditate for a bit and be with the experience in any way. But there are moments when you can't just be with the experience yourself and you need that support. Journaling has also been a big part in my life. I would write everything down in that paper and get it out of my system and then feel, okay, now that this is out of me, I don't have to be angry at somebody. I can be angry on the paper, and then now I can have a senseful, more centric conversation with them now.
It's a release form. Going back to the design side, I think early on,
Yeah.
you drew a connection between design and all of our senses. So when did you start
Yeah.
this relationship?
I have a very lovely memory associated when I was in school. I do feel very grateful for the privilege that I had to the beautiful infrastructure in my school that I went to. There were corners where we would be just feeling expansive and being with our friends. And the classrooms, we had a mezzanine kind of construction. It was either you're going into the basement or you're going on the first floor. There was no middle ground in that space because it was a contour site. It blew my mind how beautifully engaging it was for a kid who was studying in that school and going around in that space. That was my first interaction and understanding of how my senses when I'm running around and I'm feeling okay, I'm not in vision with people, but I'm now going into a space which is just opening up to so many people. There were certain aspects of a beautiful tree in the middle of that courtyard in the school, which I would just sit under and be contemplating, should I be going to the next class or should I just go do some choir and do some vocals, and just sitting there having a meal with some friends and enjoying that time. It was a beautiful space. And then I started seeing that, oh, what would it feel to be able to design something like this? Eventually, through my years, when I came to the 12th grade, it made more sense to me that, oh, it's such a meaningful thing to be able to do for someone, that if they had their own space and they couldn't design it that way, and I could create certain spaces and an experience in itself which would come together and they could engage with that and be feeling certain things. Eventually, it started becoming more and more evident with looking at other architects' work. Jeffrey Bawa has a big influence on me. His spaces in Sri Lanka are so experiential, human experience centric, and so beautiful. It's amazing. Yeah.
That sounded it left you with such a huge impression at a young age. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking now with the rise of mental health awareness, how do you see design playing a therapeutic role in people's lives? And how do you balance that
Whoa.
personality and emotional resonance projects?
That's a beautiful question. I think design has always been for people and for their experience to get more authentic, more grounding, and where they feel. If it is a home, you're supposed to feel safer, and a certain set of feelings are supposed to arise in that space, or they eventually end up arising in that space. When you are, say, in a community space or in a space where you're working every day, you're supposed to feel certain things and you're supposed to be in a headspace in a certain way. With spaces and design in general, I feel having some perspective of more human connection with the nature just brings you to such a ground. And now architecture and design with its own set of minimalistic aesthetics and cleaner lines and straight and 90 degrees and everything, in my own opinion, have felt that a little bit of imperfection, a little bit of rawness or handwork, or just even an error in the making makes it the space that it is, right? It's not supposed to be perfect. Nothing is supposed to be perfect, nor is the human experience perfect. So I feel the essence of design and this ideology of Christopher Alexander, he sees it in a very beautiful way that I also resonate with a lot. That you're a building is built in a process, right? Any structure, any space is built with a certain set of people, and those people are doing work with their hands and they're building mortar, cement, everything. Embracing that whole process makes design a lot more better for me. How do I engage with each individual on the work site and the labor or the contractor or the vendor? As much as I feel that process for myself as an architect, I also feel with the client, whoever space that is, it will change the way or the relationship of their experience in the space if it is designed with that awareness of beauty being in the little details, but at the same time in errors and imperfection and flaws. I feel working with people who understand this has been very fulfilling for me. And the whole process and the whole space comes together in a very beautiful way. It's a very ideological thing that with mental health, how do spaces evolve is a whole collaborative effort that goes with each person that goes in the space. How do you want to deal with the people in the workspace? How do you want to deal with the client? That is how it works for me as an architect. But it could be different when you look at it from the perspective of, say, a client. How would you want to have a space be more calmer? The greens, the nature has to be embraced. In Bali, when we were there, the trees, the raw materials, the textures brought everything to a more calmer headspace. And it's an experiential thing. You can be there and experience the space and feel more connected, more centered. Even the workspaces that are designed there are so neatly done and not too much chaos. The colors that you choose become easier to understand when you see it from that lens. The amount of plastic per se that goes into a space will reflect. But I feel there's a balance that nature inherently does that doesn't need to have a piercing focus on it. It doesn't have to be, oh, because we are moving towards sustainability, we have to use earth materials. But I think there's a balance of using today's technology and using the old methods and bringing them together for creating spaces that feel more nature, feel more home, or feel more work, and elevate your inner. It's a combination of everything.
Do you feel there's a spiritual element to design?
Oh, 110% the spiritual aspect of life. It doesn't have to be associated with any kind of religion or following any kind of way of being. It's how you experience life, is what spirituality is. And the more you're listening to your inner flow brings a space together for me. That is what spirituality is for me. If I am interacting with somebody with love and kindness and compassion, I see their experience. If a contractor comes to me with their headspace, I need money, I need to go, I need to do this in that aggressive way. If my headspace is in the right space, I would be able to deal with that with much more understanding of what their experience is, being in a scarcity mindset. I understand that a laborer is also somebody who's a human being, and he or she makes a living out of doing your work. And if they're fulfilled and feeling a little bit of sense of okayness in doing their work, the work will come out so great. And that okayness comes from how you are dealing with them, how you are dealing with yourself first. Because the break that I took was that I was not dealing with myself in the first place, which was trickling down with my contractors. I was agitated. I would be, why is this not finished? Why is the timeline not met? These are things that happen in a project, right? These are things that happen in a workspace when you're delegating work. Why is this not perfect? How is that other person going to be able to completely replicate, because he or she has their own way of doing this, right? When I started reflecting on my own self and my own way of being around everything, I started seeing other people's worlds there. And then engaging with them became much more easier, and engaging with the world in my work became much more easier. I feel that is what spirituality is for me. And even when I go to a space and experience the space, the senses, everything that brings in together as design is quite beautiful when I look at it from that lens. And yeah, nature is not perfect. Nothing's perfect. So it's all a cohesive balance of things.
I was just going to mention that there's an element of energy, different energetic
Mm-hmm.
exchanges you with your clients and the contractors that you work with, and also
Yeah,
energy that a space exudes for other people.
for sure.
There's
For
collection
sure.
energetically.
You put it so well, so much better than I put it. But this is exactly how I feel about it. Yes. The energy I impart, the energy my workers are going to feel, and they'll feel much better working in the space. And especially the client will feel more okay. It's going to happen at its own pace and things are working out, because the person who's spending the money is the most anxious in the process. I feel sometimes he or she is the person who's in a very difficult headspace of letting money go if they don't have a great relationship with money. That is, I
Mhm.
feel your relationship with money also changes once you see it in the light of energy or just an exchange of things.
Definitely. And you've mentioned to me before that you follow Christopher Alexander. How
Mm.
has this concept of the quality without a name influenced your approach to creating spaces?
I feel anybody who knows this individual will, or the books that he's written, it's dense information. It's the philosophy of life being reflected in his work. It started making sense to me how we critically analyze, say, maximalism or minimalism or any kind of isms that are there in design. They have their own beauty and essence to it. I can expand a little thing that I feel he's done beautifully that resonated for me a lot was when a laborer is working with hand and you have a Moroccan tile done in a nice, beautiful dye, and that goes into a space with a lot of thought that I agree, okay, this space will have this essence. That is the process that is beautiful for design instead of it being just about it has to be done perfectly or has to be met with perfection at every corner. And we as architects are taught to have very straight lines. You can't possibly have perfection. Those little errors in the skirting or in your lines, they become a part of that project and become a part of that unit being designed. That is what is the beauty of that project. I feel that he explains really beautifully that life's perfection or imperfection or even just equality is just a perception of things, right? It's how you perceive it. That's something that really resonated for me, that I was seeking a lot of, I want quality work, I want this, I want that. And then I started seeing that, okay, if I'm putting so much pressure on the person that who's doing my work for me, I'm not making the thing right. If I create that atmosphere or environment for that person to be able to work with ease, that perfection will come in itself. That eventually comes. It arrives to that point.
Can you share a project where you were really surprised by the emotional or psychological impact it had on someone?
Beautiful. You're asking really good questions. The first project that I ever got was a very emotional project for me. I was a fresher architect. I had only worked for a year at PMC, so Project Management Committee for a five-star hotel. I was doing a small job as a junior architect on site. I did understand how the managing of things went. When I took my first project, it was a big deal for me, right? Emotionally and career-wise and everything. And even for the client to be able to trust me, it was a commercial cafe project, which is everybody looks at it, right? It was a running project. It wasn't something that I did from scratch. This project was a renovation project. We had to redevelop the whole facade and the interiors in a way where we could do it in a very short time and quickly get the cafe running again. When they're renovating, they'll be losing money on a day-to-day basis. Since it was my first project, I was focusing on every little thing so crucially. Oh, this shouldn't go wrong in any way, because this is going to be my defining project for the rest of my career. There was this door, the main door of that space would open outside and inside. My client told me this has to open in both directions, and you have to make sure, because if the door opened, there was a step right here. It was just the size of the door. That space was enough to open the door and close the door. We did a new door in the same space, same functioning, same machinery, same everything. The day the door arrived, it was a glass door arrived on the site, and I was there 8 p.m. at night because it arrived late. I want things to go perfectly. I was there to take a look and get it done and then go home and relax. The guy came who was fixing the door and he was, ma'am, this is not going to open fully. It's going to crash into the staircase. She made sure, she told me it should open properly and make sure that the whole thing opens in both directions. And I started spiraling so bad. Then I had to call her and I think I fucked it up. This is the main door entrance to the cafe. She also got super anxious. Her anxiety was projected onto me. I did everything right. I don't know what is wrong. What is wrong? What happened? But it was the third guy who was measuring, who measured it wrong. When they put the door together, they put everything in place. The machinery had some margin to take it back. But that moment, the 2 hours of them putting, I couldn't go home because of that. And that moment, I realized that there are going to be things that might go wrong with the project, but I can't be spending so much energy into it. And we can fix things. Things were fixable then. There will be high stakes stuff that can go wrong, but you can't sweat on small things that go wrong. I feel after that, my client also started feeling okay about it. She started reflecting on the fact that, okay, things can go wrong. You don't have to be responsible for it because I'm being a fresher architect at the moment. So I have some risk factor here. When I started seeing it from all perspectives that I'm a fresher architect, I can make mistakes. She is somebody who's hiring somebody who's very young in the market, who's not had so much experience. That whole experience led to so much okayness in the process of making mistakes in general in projects that eventually I felt so much okayness in letting my clients know that, okay, this has fucked up and we need to fix it. I get it that it's a bit of a problem, but you also have to realize that it's a human work. We can make errors and we can have messed up drawings and we might not have looked at it fully or completely and we might have missed some point. I went home and I cried so hard that day. And I called my partner then and I called them on site and I was, oh my God, I messed it up. And I had a full bawling episode on site and crashing down. And oh my God, this is my first project. And I fucked up. It was such a learning in that process. Thankfully, everything went well. Just need to calm down and find some solutions and think of it from different lenses and it'll get solved.
Yeah, it seems things will end up working out, and I think you showed a bit more kindness and compassion to yourself.
I think that day I really cursed myself for not looking at it from all points. After a couple of days when we had a conversation with my client and she also, it's fine. Things happen in a project. I had a word with my dad about this and my dad was, it's no big deal. Happens. Life is that. You will make mistakes. And that was a big thing. That shifted a lot for me. That my dad telling me that it's fine. It's going to be fine. Because in our work, you're responsible for somebody else's money in some way, their expectations or understanding. You just need to be able to do your best and things might go wrong in that process. And that's okay. Yeah. Love and compassion came and then I understood. But in that moment, it was all frazzling.
It can be very stressful in the moment. Do you have a story of the project that you worked on where it positively impacted them?
I think my first project, the cafe that I had worked on, it was a very old school cafe vibe. A person would come, work, have a tea, and go. The idea of that cafe was organic food and it was desi food, and she had meals designed and she had good food bowls and really good organic vegan food. She came to me saying, I want families coming in. I want people to be able to see this as a more restaurant vibe than having a cafe vibe. A corners and a cozy space and a basement are usually spaces for people to chill and connect and not do much in that space. What we did for that space was that we opened up the whole facade. We created big glazing walls and we enhanced the access to that space was 3-4 steps down. We created a grander arch on the top. So it invited you in. Since we opened the facade up, the natural light flew in. You couldn't see it from the outside initially, but we designed it in a more accessible, more visually seen way. It ended up changing the whole dynamic of that space. Started moving a bit because there were more families coming in. she could showcase her meals and things on the TV. People started knowing it's called mitti. Mitti is earth, the mud. People around the society locality got to know there's an organic clean food cafe available. More families started coming in because they did not want their kids to have junk. And it became more inviting for families because it was not a closed off, cozy space where couples could be mingling or more techie people sitting and just doing their thing and occupying space. It became a more flowy space. Now she has another outlet which is more family centric and they have boomed. It really changed the way that space functioned. I feel that is one big project in my life that I really made sure things turned around for them. And we've changed the design of the space. And ever since we've changed the aesthetic of the space, and it literally changed the functioning of the user group. And it was just because of tweaking a couple of things.
That was your first project.
That was my first project.
That's awesome.
Yes. I feel when I took my break, I started to see the first project that I did with so much heart and so much attention and love, and without thinking about aspects of money and how things will go or the future anticipation of things. That project came through very smoothly. I'm going back to doing more of such projects, more of planning from a space of more okayness and actually wanting the human experience to be integrated in the space. And it makes more sense, I feel, in a lot of ways to be able to serve the client's needs and then see that how can you do that with just design.
There's also that balance in being a studio owner. There's probably that tension between creating art that moves you and meeting commercial realities of running a business. How do you juggle that?
How do you juggle that is the question, but I don't know. I'm in that space right now where I'm transitioning and understanding how to juggle that. And I took up a lot of commercial aspects of work that were happening at that point. I slowed down and started seeing the fulfilling aspects come from more grounding, more centeredness in your work, in how you deal with your people. And I think once you start getting into the flow of it, I think commercials and money also starts flowing in that way. When people start seeing your work as how you want it to be, you start drawing boundaries, you start saying no to work that does not resonate anymore. Then you start putting all of that energy into work that actually makes a difference. I feel people start reaching out to you for that. Money eventually becomes a barter in getting that work. I am also not a very materialistic per se. I love designs and I love fashion and I love everything that has to do with having good products and good furniture. But what I need for my own survival or my day-to-day life, it also does come from a lot of privilege that I have a support system that I can just fall back onto now. I can see that I don't attach myself around the idea of money as much, but I did do that for a while. How much do I really need to be able to do that? How much do I need for myself? And how much do I need to be paying my people and the people who are working with me? So then we can ask from that space, and I can ask my clients that, okay, this is the kind of work we do. For that to happen, this is the amount of money we need. It is not going to be super unjustifiable, but it is also something that is not super low and we have to cut market rates and we have to go, okay, no, there are cheaper people available. But if there are cheaper people available who are doing cheaper work, they're in a different headspace and we're in a different headspace. I feel the kind of things and products that the work that we do eventually speaks in itself. People who really want that will come to you and would want to pay for such stuff. It took me 2 years to actually come to that realization, and that tension, the push and pull had to happen for me to come to this point that, okay, there will be days when I will be feeling anxious about, oh, we don't have enough work, I don't have enough things, and I don't have enough projects to working on. But then I feel the other hand, the kind of work we put out and the kind of money we get from fees from these projects that we get from is going to be enough. It's going to be enough for us to be doing good work. And there are other aspects of design that I do want to invest myself into, which is products and stuff, which is more creative, more small centric units. If I take up too much work, it's not going to be, I won't be able to channel that energy into everything that I also want to a podcast with you or a podcast with on my own ideas of design. More creative outlets and more flow creativity has always fulfilled me. If money has to come from some other avenues. I don't want to be stopping myself by saying that, no, I'm just an architect, I'm just an interior designer, I don't want to do this or do that if I'm identifying with just being somebody. The money will start flowing once I have some flow in myself of expressing through my work or the way I speak or the way I want things.
Yeah, money can come in strange ways.
Yes.
As we
We're
wrap
not told this. We're not told this as kids, you know?
No, we're not told this. I feel a lot of things in this world are an energetic exchange.
For sure.
As we wrap up this podcast
Yeah.
with the last 4 questions, when it comes to legacy and design, when someone walks into a space you've designed, let's say 50 years from now, what do you hope they will
Wow.
feel or think?
I can only wish for them to be thinking or feeling the way I want them to think or feel. But I hope they feel the way I intended to design a certain space. If it's a space which is the home for somebody and it reflects things about them and the way they wanted to feel. And if, say, this home, my parents' home that I and my dad have designed, and it's evolving with each painting my mom puts and each material piece of furniture that comes into the space, it speaks something about them. If somebody 50 years from now walks into this space, I hope they get that essence them in the space and in some way two people lived their lives here. If they walk into a cafe I design, I hope they feel, oh, this is an organic cafe that has some elements of Indianness, freshness. They can sit and have the conversations they want to have with their families. I hope my spaces serve people the purpose that they are supposed or intended to serve. That's the whole intention.
What advice would you give to someone who is trying to find their creative voice while navigating societal or systematic pressures?
I would say find some connection with yourself first. Establish some form of understanding. You don't completely ever understand yourself or this whole thing called the universe or like life. But like getting in attunement with who, what your essence is will bring out the most authentic creative expression of you. And what do you feel when you're interacting with nature or life is going to be a big reflection. How does your lens look at things? The whole process is fulfilling. Don't look at it from the end product point of view, or I want to create great things, or I want to create the best this thing or the best that thing.
Just exploring.
Look in so many perspectives that are available. Nature is a big teacher. Go watch sunsets. Take time off. That's creativity just flows if there is flow inside, I feel. And whatever you're experiencing is a big reflection of how your flow is. And then you can actually be telling stories. I feel stories are to be told.
What is the one takeaway you want to leave listeners with as we wrap up the podcast?
Wow, man. This was such a wonderful experience to do. I'm really grateful that you wanted to do this with me. I'm so glad that I could walk through everything in my headspace and could narrate everything, which is so fun. One takeaway from this thing, don't take me seriously at all. Just find your own fucking way to do everything. I am just speaking from my own perspective and what I am experiencing in my life. And it's different for everyone, so unique for everyone. So everyone's special in their own ways. Find that thing and just enjoy, man. Enjoying the process in general. I'm able to share this with you or everyone who might watch this. And that is what has been really enjoyable for me. I think I had lacked that, and being able to get a feedback from people. Okay, the way you see things is unique and fun in its own way was quite fulfilling for me just to understand. I hope somebody can take that away from this podcast and find their own unique lens towards life and work and family dynamics and parents. And I hope the chaos is all embraced. It's never a linear trajectory ever.
My last question is, how can others find you if they would to connect with you?
We can put some stuff in the description, links to my Instagram or Twitter and email. These 3 things I can probably share. I have my own personal page and then my work page that is called Saku the Studio. My studio is called Saku. Saku is a Japanese word for to bloom. It was my grandmother's home name. We'll link stuff in the description below.
And awesome. As we wrap up the podcast, thank you for taking the time, your early morning with me to your personal journey, your transition, the dynamic with the parents, and any challenges that you had, and also your design philosophy. So all very interesting topics.
Thank you for asking me all of those beautiful questions. And I'm glad we get to do this. Thank you so much for having me. And it was a pleasure.
Meow. That's it for this episode of Explore with Mimi. If today's story got you thinking, laughing, or maybe even planning your next big leap, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend. It might be just what they need too. Remember, no matter where life takes you, what if it all works out? I'll see you next time.